and 2. And good evening. We get to undo this. Oh, look, Laura's coming in. Yeah, no, that's fine. I actually just got my okay. And I got a week and a half ago, I got my 4th booster, which laid me out completely for a day. So I get why people don't do it, but I did it because, right. Like with you in my line of work, I can't, I can't have things where people blame me. All right.
Right.
We're up to Shabbos.
Yep, Shabbos. So the bracha for Torah study is Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu v'tzivanu v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And chapter 2 of Genesis, which, if you're familiar with it, goes like this. We'll do it first in Hebrew. Right. So you might know it from Friday night. That is copied and pasted into the Siddur onto a bencher for Kiddush. That's done at home around the Shabbat table. It's the beginning of Kiddush on Friday night. In the shul, it's between the silent Amidah and the semi-repetition of it. So it's in both spots. It comes from here. This is, I might have mentioned at the end of the last class, this is the clearest place where we see that chapter headings are Christian in origin and not Jewish. Everyone uses them the most, in...
It's convenient.
Right, it's good because it's convenient. In 500-year-old copies of the Talmud, they'll reference the chapter headings so it's not just like, liberal American Jews who use them. Everyone uses them. Because it's convenient, it's easy, lets you know where you're at. But here, it's divided up the 7 days of creation. Days, if it was a Jewish editor, chapter 1 would include all 7 days, because in a Jewish conception, all 7 days are sort of equal and essential, right? The 7th is just as important as the previous 6. Shabbat is somewhat de-emphasized, in Christian thought. Right, so is if anything more important. So there's 6 days of creation, then a break, and then the 7th day in chapter 2. So this is like where it's that division is sort of obvious, but also that teaches us that the chapter divisions are late, meaning they're 1,000 or more years old, but not 2,000 years old. We'll go with Richard Elliott Friedman's translation because that's what I'm looking at. The skies and the earth and all their array were finished. And then the 7th day, God finished his work that he had done and ceased in the 7th day from all his work that he had done. And God blessed the 7th day and made it holy because he ceased in it from doing all his work, which God had created. The wording is super strange, but step by step. 1, everything is finished. Is the first statement, and 2, it
says there ceased.
Cease.
It said
Finish. So 2 different words. God finished vayachal, and God.
To me implies he put the dot on the end of the sentence, but he did something.
And then, so this is what's funny, right? So, but he did something, right? Yes. So, seriously, that. And the 7th day, God finished his work that he had done and ceased in or on the 7th day.
If you wanted to make Shabbos a day where you do nothing, he would have done that Friday night.
You're saying Erev Shabbat.
Yes.
Right. And so
finishing, he did something.
With that, which by the way, in finishing doing something, that actually is one of the categories of the 39 categories of prohibited labor. on Shabbat that we find in the Mishnah. One of the things that is forbidden is, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. But now that I said it, I'm not going to. Is makea patish, finishing something. So finishing something is one of the labors that you're not supposed to do on Shabbat. So you could make the argument that you're making, that God finishes and thereby is violating the very principles of Shabbat that we have. Possibly. There's nothing said that God created, but God ceased.
Cease is a different word than finishing, is what I'm saying.
Right.
I would have put finishing on the last thing on Friday,
Right. So
or the sixth day.
right on the sixth day. So right. So we'll read it this way: being vaychulu hashamayim va'aretz is and it was finished, the heavens and the earth and all their array. So first it says it was finished, and then it says God finished, or you could say God had finished. If you could say that, right? So if you said had finished, you would.
Then it's fine.
Then it'd be fine, right? So again,
What is it there?
God, it was finished, and then it says God finished. So are those two separate things? Good close read. I'm not gonna get on anyone
Yeah,
for
and Alter's translation, just for the record, is similar. In
Right.
the beginning, he said, and God completed on the seventh day. And then a little later on at the end of the first paragraph, he says he had ceased from all his tasks that he had created to do.
right
So-
for that he had ceased.
Right.
Right, yeah. So right. So this is just a handful of verses, right? 1, 2, 3 and a half, 4. Right. Vayishbot is the word for either ceased or rested in King James. And obviously it's from Vayishbot that the root is Shin Bet Tav. It's where you get Shabbat. So what we're doing is what God did, or what we call is what God did. Let's check the Everett Fox. Thus were finished the heavens and the earth with all their array. God had finished. He actually does translate with the had, which is, you say, on the seventh day, the work that he had made. And then he ceased on the seventh day from all his work that he had made. God gave the seventh day his blessing, and he hallowed it. For on it he ceased from all his work that by creating God had made. That's like, again, the end of it is very odd, because it ends with and God ceased or rested on the seventh day from all the work that he had done, and God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he ceased all the work that he had created to do. There's that weird la'asot at the end there, right? It should just end. He ceased from all the work that God had created, but in fact, he ceased from all the work that God had created to do. Right. So what does that mean? So it's either like it's an odd. It's an
people trying to make the interpretation what they want.
No. Each of these are trying to make it what it is.
What it is or what they want.
What it is. I think Art Scroll, for instance, says that they want their translation to follow Rashi. Whatever Rashi says it means, that's what we're going to say it means. JPS, what we have in the Eitz Chaim, wants to make it readable and understandable. These guys are all trying to reflect what and Everett Fox wants it to reflect the Hebrew, emphasizing the rhythm of the Hebrew. Each of these guys, Alter and Friedman, both want to make it reflect what's in the Hebrew and not what we want the Hebrew to be.
Okay.
JPS, I think,
That's an important statement.
right. JPS has more of a sense of we want you to understand it. And so has like a more, it smooths out some of the rough edges. These guys are specifically here not to smooth over the rough edges, but to leave it there, to leave it problematic. So again, that's why Alter's translation is, for on it, he had ceased from all his work, all his task that he had created to do. Which is weird, like creating something to do implies that there's more to be done, which is right. So that could right, it could be that. Like, so that's sort of one read of it, is that, well, God created the work to do, and so we're here to do it.
What did Rashi say about that?
Check the Rashi. The Cain and Abel is too far. All right, so the Rashi, God completed on the seventh day. Rashi actually makes your comment, Myron.
I'm honored.
So I think what he's saying is in here. So on that line, and God completed on the seventh day. He quotes from the Talmud, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Basar v'dam she'eino yodea itim v'ragav. Flesh and blood, meaning people, human beings, who do not know times and moments precisely. Tzarich losif mechol ala kodesh. Must add. People have to add from the profane, i.e. weekdays, to the Kodesh, to the Shabbat, meaning that you always have to start Shabbat a little bit early, because what if you miss the proper time, right? So the candle lighting famously is 18 minutes before before the sun hits the horizon, right? Like, so because you could make a mistake, you always make sure that you're at it. Just like, you stop your car, whatever, 10 feet before the bumper of the guy in front of you. You could say all you really need is 6 inches, but because you're prone to making mistakes, I'm prone to making mistakes, we stop our cars with a big cushion because we could make mistakes. It's like, this is how we are with Shabbat. You take it seriously, so you add from the profane onto it, right? A computer-based car might not need those 10 feet. The computer-based car probably could use 6 inches, right? Because it doesn't need a lot of space. It's more precise. It says, but God, Vakadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be God, Sheyodea itim v'ragim, who knows times and moments precisely, because God doesn't make these same kind of mistakes. Nichnas bo b'chut sa'ara, entered the seventh day like a hair's breadth. And it appeared as if God finished the work of creation on that day. Because we leave 10 feet in front of the car in front of us. God leaves a hair in front of the car in front of him. We add 18 minutes. God did it to the microsecond. And so it seems as if God was working on the seventh day. Rashi picks up the problem that you pick up, which is it says on the seventh day. And he says, what does that mean? It means that it's if it's on the seventh day. But it's the same, but he picks up on the exact thing that you picked up on, which is impressive.
I think he's doing an end around.
He's doing an end around. Well, that's when we say that there's when you indicate translators always have a purpose. So Rashi's purpose is read the text closely and make sure that it conforms with traditional belief.
Yeah, traditional belief can ask.
Right. But not to Rashi, it didn't. Not to Rashi and not to the ultra-Orthodox, publishers of Art Scroll. To them, it's important that everything conforms. So he's like, when it says it means as if. It's like when you say I'm starving. Doesn't mean you're starving. It means that it's as if I'm super hungry, right? So yeah, a hair's breadth. Great line, by the way. Devar acher. This is Rashi often will give 2 explanations. If he's not totally satisfied, if he thinks the first one might not be totally satisfied, which it didn't satisfy you. Other thing. What was the word lacking after 6 days? God had created everything. It was very good. What was lacking? Menucha. Exactly. Rest. Ba Shabbat, ba Menucha. When Shabbat came, rest came into the world. And then the work was completed and finished. What does God create on the seventh day? Shabbos creates rest.
So that's the extra thing he did.
That's the extra thing he did. We created Shabbos, right? So that's yeah. The so that and right. The all right, so that now, so that's Rashi. That's the first 7 days of creation. That's what we're going to call all of that chapter 1, including the spillover into chapter 2. That's chapter 1. That's the first creation story. What I want you to do is forget everything you've learned, because it starts over. Chapter 2, you can read a couple of different ways. Chapter 2, you can either read as the way the traditional will read it is sort of as a close-up of the wide shot that we just heard. Like the chapter 1 is this very majestic, the heavens and the earth, and it's like, and again, it's like the establishing shot of a movie where it like views everything at a distance, and then you slowly zero in on the one, after the big skyline shot of New York, you zero in on the one, couple walking down the street that you're going to focus on for the whole movie or whatever it is. And the tradition sort of reads that the chapter 2 this way, is that we had the big wide shot and now we're going to zero in on it. That's one way of seeing it. Scholars, if you want to be an epicurus, if you want to be a heretic, say that these are two different creation stories stitched together, that these are two independent stories that a later editor places next to each other to create the larger narrative. I think at the very least, whichever one you take, it's worth reading it both ways, meaning read chapter 2 with chapter 1 in mind, but also read it as an independent story. And you have to read it as an independent story because it doesn't map on. It doesn't, in fact, match. If you read it, you'll see, when we read it, we'll see that there's a different order to the things that go on. It's not all, the order that things are created isn't identical with everything we just read. So that's why you have to wipe your mind clean and think of this as an entirely new story. And it is on some level that the two independent stories coming together create something that is greater than either would separately. This is, Paul and John and George and Ringo may have a few nice songs independently, but like together, they did more. And the same might be true with the creation stories, that read them together. But so chapter 2, erase everything you know from chapter 1. Imagine as if the Torah is beginning here. Chapter 2. And these are the records of the skies and the earth and the heavens and the earth when they were created, and the day that Adonai. So can't even get through one verse. Chapter 1 uses one name for God, only uses the term Elohim, God. In chapter 2, that is never used. In chapter 2, God is only referred to as Adonai Elohim, Yud He Vav He, and then Elohim after it. So the main name for God that we use, Yud He Vav He, the Tetragrammaton, is what's used here. So that's part of why scholars will say that it's a totally different story with a totally different author. Why? Because God has a totally different name, or not a totally different name, but a different name. So in traditional English, Yud He Vav He, God's holy name that we say that we pronounce as Adonai, is translated as Lord. Usually, they'll do it Lord with like drop caps, like sort of like in all capital letters. But Elohim will be translated as God, either capital G or lowercase g, and Yud He Vav He will be translated as Lord. The reason it's translated as Lord is in part because the word that we use to not say God's name is Adonai, which means my Lord. So the word Adonai means my Lord, so that's why they translate it Lord. But Yud He Vav He itself doesn't mean Lord. It's a name. It's a proper name. It's like Bob. God's name is Yud He Vav He. So verse 4. So you could say Adonai Elohim or Lord God, whichever you want. On the day that the Lord God made earth and heavens, no shrub of the field being yet on the earth, and no plant of the field yet sprouted. For the Lord God had not caused the rain to fall on the earth, and there was no human to till the soil, and wetness would well up from the earth to water all the surface of the soil. Then the Lord God fashioned the human humus from the soil, and blew into his nostrils the breath of life, and the human became a living creature.
So the human came first.
Here, right, notice chapter 2, if you hit like a hard reset on it, notice here, vegetation isn't there yet. Vegetation exists in potential, no shrub of the field being yet on the earth, and no plant of the field yet sprouted, right? It's like in potential in the earth, but not yet grown. And then the human is created, and we'll see later on, animals are created. And maybe even later on trees. Like, so the order is very different from chapter 1. Chapter 2 has not, you can read it as chapter 2 hasn't read chapter 1. It's a reboot, is what you would say in Hollywood today, right? Like where like they sort of like, they're just restarting the story. And like you forget that you saw like 6 other Spider-Man movies. We're doing a new Spider-Man, and now the story is starting again. So like, notice that it's so incredible. On the day the Lord God made earth and heavens, i.e. one day, no shrub of the field being yet on the earth, and no plant of the field yet sprouted. For the Lord God had not caused rain to fall on the earth. There's no human to till the soil. Note here also, the human has a specific purpose. In chapter 1, which I keep asking you to forget and reminding you of, in chapter 1, the human has a purpose. It's to dominate. Remember, like dominate the fish of the sea and the animals in the field. Like humans are created last in order to be the master of everything. You are in charge. I can create everything, we're the like designee of the landlord. I don't know, whatever the proper term is, right? We're the overseer, whatever it is. We're in charge. God created us to be in charge. We have all the power. God gives us the power over everything in the world. Chapter 2 doesn't know this. Chapter 2, humans are created pretty much first. It's like land, then people. And we have a purpose. There is no human to till the soil. Guess what your purpose in life is? To work. In chapter 1, we're the masters. In chapter 2, it's like we're the servants. We're there to work this world that God has created. It's a totally different conception of what life is about.
Yeah. But what's the one?
But what's for lunch, right? Oh, can we eat meat? There's no food yet, right? We'll get there. We'll get there because they're right.
Far away.
It can't be too far away because you're not going to. But notice this. So 1, hard reset, total restart. So the plants are there in potential, but there's no wetness, so it hasn't started. There is rain now, but not in the story. And no human to till the soil. So again, really incredible.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Yeah, one thought and one question. You know, you had mentioned putting these things together. Maybe the idea is that humans are to do both. They're to be the master of everything. Plus, they've got to do their part also. They're not sitting back, lying in the Garden of Eden asking the elephants to do everything, and they've got to play a role in and have some responsibility to do some of the work as well.
Right, right, exactly. That I think that by the way is the beauty of like, that's the John and Paul are better together sort of thing, like that like chapter 1, dominate and rule, chapter 2, serve the earth. Together now we've got something. We're not just here to work, and we're not low status. And also, if you think that it's all about you, you've got an issue. Like, so so again, that's part of the brilliance. If they are 2 stories edited together, it's not a totally sloppy edit, because it creates this.
But yeah, a question: why? And maybe there's no answer to this. Well, one small question was, I had noticed also, it's just a single day. And
Yes.
is that significant, and why? But also, why do you need two stories to say that? Why can't you say it in one story?
So, I mean, again, we don't know because there's no like ask the author session,
Right. There's no
or at
Q
least
and
not
A.
one you want to be at until you're 120.
Right.
So we don't know, though the possibilities include one, the Northern Kingdom had a story that reflected chapter 1, and everyone knew it, and so you couldn't get rid of it. The Southern Kingdom, Judah, had a story that reflected chapter 2, and everyone knew it, so you couldn't get rid of it. And so this is sort of like true with like many of the things in the Torah. The idea is that sort of like that two traditions existed, and then they get stitched together, and you couldn't throw any of them out because everyone knows the stuff to be true.
It would be interesting to know if the northern half and the southern half each had one of those stories, whether their work ethic or lack of reflected which story they were putting forth.
Good question. That I can't answer, but
Right.
that's a good question. So that's it. Though the main thing that we focus on in that aspect is the chapter 1, which is also is to be priestly. God is remote, way up there, right? God is very distant and remote. Says it is. It's very magisterial. It's like it's a very distant king. In you and I have nothing in common with God of chapter 1. It's super distant and remote and etc. Chapter 2 and 3, not so. In chapter 3 is really a continuation of chapter 2. God will be walking around the garden. God will ask questions. Where are you? God will get angry. Chapter 1, God doesn't get angry. Chapter 1, God is totally distant and remote. Chapter 2, God walks, gets angry, is surprised by the way people act, and so they're very different conceptions of God in that way, and the two of them will combine into one conception of God. But chapter 1, remote, distant, like that's the distant, like if you think of even our prayers, Avinu Malkeinu, the Malkeinu, the king, is distant in a far off place. The Av, the father, the parent, is supposed to be close and caring. Like, so you see that here, like one is a distant king, the other is like very present and hands-on. So those are the main differences between the two, or among the main differences. So are they, but yeah, so different order. Heavens and the earth are created on one day, then vegetation in potential, then people. And Alter does a nice thing with the translation, because normally it says that he creates a person or Adam out of the dust of the ground, which is a nice image. Again, there's sort of like a degree of humility there. But Alter translates a human hummus from the soil, which captures that Adam is created from Adamah. So a human is created from the hummus. That like the idea is that in our being, we're dirt, we're the soil, we're the physical stuff. And then God takes this lump of clay and breathes the divine breath into it, the ruach, which is the word for wind or for breath or for spirit. And that ruach is breathed into that lump of clay, that lump of dirt, and it becomes a living being. It's a beautiful image, that sort of, and it speaks to sort of like the uniqueness of being human, where you're physical, and that physical means that you're born and you'll die, and you want to do physical things. You want to eat, you want to go to the bathroom, and you want to have sex. Like all those physical animal-like things are present. But also there's this sort of like, you're not like an animal in that you are self-conscious and you have these sort of like higher ideals and abstract and ethical thoughts and things like that. And in that you're like God. So,
and Rabbi, To differentiate, as I recall, and maybe there's more detail, there wasn't any detail like this for the other creatures, as far as how they didn't come from a lump of clay or dirt
We'll see in
or
chapter
did-
2. In
Oh,
chapter 2, all the creations are coming up.
okay,
Hold on to that.
okay,
Hold on to that thought. So here though, like again, so earth exists, vegetation in the ground, but not sprouting yet, then creates a human, Adam from Adamah. And the human, Adam, again, Adam in English is, and eventually in Hebrew is a name with a capital letter, an uppercase letter. Here, it really just means human. It's not a name, it just means human. Verse 8. And the Lord God planted a garden in Eden to the east, and he placed there the human that he had fashioned. So God plants the garden. There's a location in the east, which means that the reader is supposed to be in a specific place, and that place is not in Eden, B, west of Eden. We're given a location where Eden is, so that it's clear that the reader is supposed to be in the land of Israel. But like in the east is just sort of a tip of like that something's going on. And notice that the human is not created in Eden. The human is created out of Eden and is placed into Eden, right?
east of Eden.
No, East of Eden. East of Eden is a Steinbeck book that's a lot.
Right.
That's extended midrash. That book is a midrash on the Cain and Abel story, which is coming up, because Abel, after Abel gets killed, Cain is going to be kicked out of the garden, and he's going to be kicked out to the east. So all of Cain's life is to the east, and the Steinbeck book is going to be sort of playing on that story, and they will talk about the Hebrew. Steinbeck talks about the Hebrew translation in there, which is part of why it's an awesome book. So the human is created somewhere else and is placed. It's almost like, I always picture like a big Monty Python hand, like placing the human, like almost like a dollhouse in right? But that's the image given. Verse 9. And the Lord God caused to sprout from the soil every tree lovely to look at and good for food. And the tree of life was in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge, good and evil.
It doesn't distinguish days.
Correct. There's no indication that this is not all on one day. And notice that here trees are coming next. God sort of like causing it to sprout from the soil. Trees lovely to look at and good for food. And the tree of life is in the midst of the garden. And tree of knowledge, good and evil. Now, that's just for your information. There are many trees there. These are among them. Verse 10, we're going to get a location on this. Now, a river runs out of Eden to water the garden, and from there splits off into 4 streams. The name of the first is Pishon, the one that winds through the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold. And the gold of that land is goodly. Bdellium is there, and lapis lazuli. And the name of the second river is Gihon, the one that winds through all the land of Cush. And the name of the third river is Tigris, the one that goes to the east of Ashur. And the fourth river is Euphrates. So we got a location. The catch is that the location is nowhere on earth, because Tigris and Euphrates, you know where these are. These wind through Iraq and then off, into Syria and Asia Minor. But you know where the Tigris and Euphrates are? And Cush, no, Cush here is that's Hodu. Cush is Ethiopia. On the other side. Yeah.
That's kind of far away.
Right, yes. So and Pishon might be the something is the Nile. So they're all given they're all given a they're all given a place, but like these places aren't, it's not like one place. It's a little bit like Springfield and The Simpsons. It's sort of like everywhere and nowhere. Like, so all of these important spots these important rivers are named, but not, but it's not clear where it is. Richard Elliott Friedman thinks that it's all a pun, that each one is punning on something else. But the point is, you're given a location. The rivers water the garden, and then it becomes these rivers around which civilizations are formed, right? Ethiopia, probably Egypt, Mesopotamia, like the core places where in that region where civilization began. 15. And the Lord God took the human and set him down in the Garden of Eden to till it and watch it, right? So the human's given a task to till and to watch the Garden of Eden, to guard it. And this is where another great Rashi, it says that when it says that God took the human and placed him there, Rashi notes that the word for took, lakach, I think is what's used. I'll get this right. Veikach, God took the human and placed him in Edom, is the same word that is used when somebody convinces somebody of something with words. So he says, Veikach, how did God take the human? He doesn't, here, Rashi doesn't imagine the dollhouse scenario. So God took him, Adam, with pleasant words, and persuaded him to enter. And this is where Aviva Gottlieb Zornberg, the great Torah commentator, says that, what does it mean to persuade somebody with nice words? What's our word for that? Is to seduce. If you convince somebody to come somewhere with pleasant words, you're seducing them. And that what God's doing is seducing Adam to come to Eden, for whatever purpose that might be.
Instead of commanding?
Instead of commanding.
There's got to be a reason.
With nice words, right? In other words, right, sort of that's it. Not using force, but using persuasion.
So Adam had a choice.
So, which implies that Adam had a choice. Though again, the story is totally hard to understand. The core of the story obviously all revolves around the tree of knowledge. But what can the tree of knowledge be? Or like what knowledge is implied? Because of course, to choose not to eat from the tree implies the ability to make a choice. So there's
the alternative.
Alternative was to live in Eden forever.
Right. So that's the thing. It's not entirely like, this is the thing, like what's being said in this, the most famous of stories, I don't think what it is what's going on is clear. Now, Richard Elliott Friedman disagrees with Robert Alter on translation of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. He translates the tree of knowledge of good and bad, and specifically says, not good and evil, as this is usually understood and translated. Evil suggests that this is strictly moral knowledge, right? But the Hebrew word ra, bad, has a much wider range of meaning than that. It may mean knowledge of what is morally good and bad, or it may mean qualities of good and bad in all realms, morality, aesthetics, utility, pleasure and pain, and so on. Meaning evil is only something that is a moral quality. A person can be evil, but an apple, maybe an apple isn't good because it's associated with the story. If I eat I can have a bad slice of pizza. I can't have an evil slice of pizza, right? The pizza can't be evil, but it can be bad. The quality is bad. It's not fit for the purpose. I can have a bad chair that I'm sitting in. It's not fit for its purpose. There's something that's wrong with it, but it can't be evil. So things can be bad. It just means that it's not fit, but evil isn't the word for that. So the question is, are they eating the tree? Friedman thinks it's important to understand that it's good and bad, not good and evil. Good and evil means that it's moral knowledge. Bad would be something else, would be like discerning between, is this fit, is this appropriate, or is it inappropriate? Dogs, like you think of a dog can be bad, meaning bad dog. Disobedient, we mean, not doing the right thing, but not evil, right? You wouldn't say that. So lots of things. If you can think, bad and evil can be synonyms, but often not the case. Richard Elliott Friedman going on. It may mean that things are good and bad in themselves, and that when one eats from the tree, one acquires the ability to see these qualities, meaning that I can just determine, is this a good place for the chair to be, or a bad place for it to be? Or it may mean that one eats from the tree, one acquires the ability to make judgments of good and bad. Perhaps the meaning was clear to the ancient reader who knew the immediate connotations of the words. It's not clear to us in the text of the story as it has survived. The only immediate consequence of eating the tree in the story is that before eating from the tree, the humans are not embarrassed over nudity, and after eating from it, they are. So that's why it's so that's the one thing that happens. We know that before they eat, they're not embarrassed that they're naked, and after they eat, they are embarrassed. So that suggests sexual maturity, right? The child, 2-year-olds, 2-year-olds can walk around naked and no one cares, but a 22-year-old can't. And the difference is sexual maturity, right? So that seems to be what one is conscious of. The 2-year-old is not embarrassed over his nudity, and the 22-year-old is embarrassed, or should be embarrassed over his nudity. Like there's weight to it.
Why did God forbid the eating of that?
This is part of, so again, that's why it's not clear. Why does God forbid eating the tree? There's no great answer. It could be to teach people that you are wired differently than everything else. Because as Leon Kass says in his book, like the second Eve reaches for the fruit of the tree, she's made her choice. He says to reach for it is to reach for the fruit is to have eaten the fruit. There's no, like, once she reaches for it, it's done. She's made, like, at that, like, she's already in a different level of being. I think it's like, to look at that, this is how you are. To be human is to have to eat the tree, is to have to eat from the tree. And yeah, you simply have to. Because obviously, there's, because the story seems to be meant to teach us something, because
ignorance for eternity.
For eternity.
Not what man is
that's not what people do. People can't not eat from the tree. Because again, notice the tree of life is not forbidden. The tree of life is not forbidden. Well, we'll see. Isn't forbidden to the humans. Only the tree of knowledge of good and bad is forbidden. So they could have gone and eaten from the tree of life. Fine. It's just the one that was forbidden to them. A. B. The idea that it's there to teach is that because obviously if God didn't want to eat from it, then don't put it there. Put it on top, put the tree on top of Mount Everest. Right. Yeah, this is the thing. If you don't want them to eat it, don't put it there.
Don't do it, but he really wanted them to do it. then this was a test of getting them to rebel.
Right, or to show them something, right? Yeah, because you got grandchildren, like Marissa, they lock up the knives or whatever, right? Like you don't want them to have access. You prevent access. Put a have lasers shooting out from the ground around the tree. Like do something. Put a fence. But no, the tree's there and accessible, which is. Like, so what's this up? And again, like it's always in the negative, right? Sort of like everything, I mean, you'll say everything you can eat, just not the one I give you. And it's also part of human nature, right? 99.9% yours for free. And what does a human go for? The 0.1.
Did any commentators say that this was a test and God intended it?
Yeah.
For them to
Yes.
test?
Yes. Yeah.
Wanted them to
Yes. What or wanted or like that is there, that's there so that we learn that. Learn that what it is. But yeah, so incredible. So that's verse 15 and Adonai Elohim took the human and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to watch over it. And Elohim commanded the human, saying, you may eat from every tree of the garden, but from the tree of knowledge of good and bad, you shall not eat from it, because in the day you eat from it, you'll die, or you're doomed to die. So there's a few things going on there. Everything you may eat from every tree, that's what they're going to eat. One tree you may not, because in the day that you eat from it, you'll die. Now,
Or you'll be doomed to die.
or you'll be doomed to die.
Yeah,
The altar translates doomed to die. Because on the day, if it's a day you eat on it, you die, then it doesn't happen. Adam lives for 930 years. If it's on the day you eat from it, you're doomed to die, that just means that the day you eat from it, the clock starts ticking.
Yeah.
So if they didn't eat from it, they could have lived forever.
That's the implication.
That's where I was going to go with that also. Maybe the ultimate plan is that humans are supposed to have a finite life. Although why not just do that instead of tempting them by saying, don't eat this or else?
Right. That's the thing. So is this all, which again brings up, is this all a plan gone awry? Which is that God envisions everything. Oh, I'll make humans and they'll live in the garden. And as long as they don't go running into the street, we're going to be happy and all the time. And it will be static and nice. Nothing will ever change. Why do they ever have to grow up? It's always, or is that the intention and it all goes horribly wrong? Or is it something else? I don't think the text is by any means clear on it. And then we're going to the next one. This is totally loaded here, verse 18. And Adonai Elohim said, it's not good for the human to be by himself. I'll make for him a strength corresponding to him. This is Ezer Kenegdo. Richard Elliott Friedman translates strength corresponding to him. Robert Alter translates what?
Sustainer.
Sustainer beside him.
Yes.
And King James will famously translate, and the most influential of all translations, of course, will translate a help meet beside him. Help meet being like Elizabethan English for help mate. So the Art Scroll here translates a helper against him. So what one thinks of the companion for Adam, Ezer Kenegdo is a loaded term that can be translated in this super wide variety of ways. Because Ezer can mean helper, like Ezra is like what you'd say if you need help in Hebrew, or but also means strength, right? We see Oz, right, means my strength, or Adonai Oz la'amo yitein, Adonai will give strength to God's people, like that. So it means helper, or it can mean strength, and kenegdo can mean almost like for, or it can be opposite, or it can be against, or it can be corresponding to. So King James says a helper for him, and woman then in that conception is a helper for Adam. Or no, it's Hebrew, the Ezer kenegdo. Yeah, keneged, keneged kulam. You say like or Richard Elliott Friedman translates a strength corresponding to him. If woman is a strength corresponding to man, that's very different than a helper for man. Like so, there's a lot of philosophy that can come out of what you think that it can be translated as.
Women are second class in every religion.
So women are second in every or in most every society, I would say, maybe more broadly. The argument, by the way, for understanding it the way King James understands it, is a helper for him, is what Myron just said, which is that in almost every society, men have been the principals and women have been subordinate. The argument for strength corresponding to, or alters, what do we say, sustainer beside him, is something that's more equal. Is that I think in the Hebrew Bible, and we've said this in other contexts, that women are clearly inferior socially, but not inferior intellectually or morally. Eve, say you will about her, is not dumber than Adam. If anything, she might even have more on the ball than he does.
Yeah.
Sarah, to fast forward, isn't Abraham's intellectual inferior. She's clearly his equal. Rebecca not only isn't inferior in knowledge to Isaac, she seems a whole lot smarter and sharper than he is. Rebecca seems to be quite smart, and Isaac somewhat less so. The Leah and Rivka are not intellectually less than Jacob. Like whenever you have a full portrait, you'll notice that the women aren't actually less than. So I think there's a chance that in ancient Jewish civilization, women were socially inferior because that's how you structured your societies, but they didn't actually think of women as less than. You will find later on, after the encounter with Greek and Roman society, that Jewish society will think of women as less than. But I don't think that's baked into the earlier levels. I think all of these women are the intellectually equals and moral equals of their husbands, say. But socially, men have the power. So that's why I think you can make a reasonable argument that they may have understood it as something more egalitarian, as it were, strength corresponding to or sustainer beside, and not just a helper for. So I actually think that argument could be made. So I'm going to pause there because that's a good place to pause. Because what happens next is going to take a whole lot more than a couple of minutes. But yeah, Ezer Kenegdo is a totally loaded term, because if in fact all of Western society has been based on that woman is a helper for him, and in fact she's a strength that is equal to him, it's a whole different read.
Yes.
Both again could be legitimate reads. Men, right, or you could say that men wrote the rule book, in which case if it is a strength corresponding to him, like all the more so. And we'll see as the story goes on, I think that there's a decent argument to say a strength corresponding to, or something like this. I'm gonna check Everett Fox last thing he says. Help. Now, Adonai Elohim said, "It's not good for the human to be alone. I will make him a helper corresponding to him." And he says, corresponding to opposite, literally opposite. The whole phrase, Ezer Kenegdo, could be rendered a helping counterpart. At any rate, the Hebrew does not suggest a subordinate position for women. You can argue that one way or the other. All right.
So when did they get banned from the?
That's coming up. They are going, they will be. Coming up, they're going to get banned from Eden, and they're going to have a. Oh,
When did women get banned from Minyan?
when did women get banned from Minyan? From going up to the Torah? That will be much later. In the rabbinic understanding, that positive time-bound commandments are obligatory to males, but not to females, meaning not the thou shalt nots, but the thou shalts, that those are only, and if they're like limited time, that those are only binding on males. And so that's thing one. And also on the idea that there's a statement in the Talmud, Kol Isha Erva, that a woman's voice is like nakedness, that hearing a woman's voice is so sexually titillating for a male that he's not going to be able to concentrate on anything else. And because of that, it's that hearing a woman's voice, it's lewdness. It's like dressing. It's like dressing as if you were at the beach in the shul. Like it's just not. It's not proper. So that. But that's when I say that the later encounter with Greece and Rome leads to the idea of women not being somehow inherently inferior. I think it comes